Sorry.
Now, a homeowner from Oxfordshire is facing a large fine after a judge ruled his security cameras and his video doorbell invade his neighbour's privacy. Jon Woodard said he installed the cameras in good faith to deter burglars, but his next-door neighbour objected to being filmed, took him to court and won. The judge said Mr Woodard's devices broke data laws and contributed to harassment. Well, let's talk now to privacy consultant Jamal Ahmed. Jamal, thank you very much for being with us on BBC News this evening. First of all, let's just kind of follow this through. This is, as much as anything, as I understand it, about the way these devices were used and how the information gathered by them was kind of looked after, maintained, kept secure. What was at the heart of this?
So good evening, Sean, and thank you very much for having me. What's at the heart of this is recognizing an individual's right to privacy as a basic human right. And that's something that's enshrined in law, both the UK Data Protection Act and the UK GDPR, which was a European piece of law that came into effect in 2018. And what that says is, if you are going to be processing someone's personal information, that's their voice recordings, their conversations, their photos, their videos, for anything beyond a purely private domestic nature, then you have to follow data protection laws. And by private domestic, what they mean is if you're going to be using a doorbell camera or CCTV, you can use it on your property up to the boundary, including your garden. Anything that goes beyond the boundary into your neighbor's garden, into your neighbor's parking spaces, into the public space, means you are now in scope of UK data protection laws. And what happened in this case was the gentleman's cameras, his recording equipment went beyond the boundary of his property and actually started capturing the claimant in the case.
So his neighbour was saying, look, I don't want you to have recordings of when I leave the house, when I arrive, who visits me, all of that kind of thing, which sounds perfectly reasonable. But I guess he hadn't even considered this problem, and perhaps less so with cameras, more so with the doorbells, which are becoming ubiquitous. I guess most of us haven't thought about this either. What should we be doing?
So if we are going to be using CCTV cameras, if we are going to be using doorbell cameras, the first thing is any invasion of someone's audio recordings is seen as a greater risk to the rights and freedoms of an individual. So that means you should actually have an option to toggle the recordings off, because that's seen as a violation. And if you look at the case when Judge Melissa Clark gave her decision, she said actually the audio recordings were actually seen as more intrusive to the claimant's rights, and that amounted to harassment. And these microphones are very powerful. They can pick up conversations up to 40 meters away. That means you could be in your garden on a Sunday afternoon enjoying some family time, but your neighbor from 40 meters down the road could be listening to all of your conversations, and you have no knowledge about what they're recording, how long they're going to keep that information for, who they're going to share it with. And of course, the other concerns are with security. Anybody could potentially hack in to someone's Wi-Fi system and capture that information. And oftentimes with devices such as the Ring alarm, is it transmits that information onto a mobile phone. So you could be out and about anywhere, and people can easily share that information, share your recordings, share your conversations without your knowledge.
Now
what the Information Commissioner's Office says is, if you are going to be doing any kind of surveillance, so you have a doorbell camera or a Ring camera or a CCTV camera that is capturing either sound or images or photos of anyone beyond the boundaries of your property, you have to comply with data protection laws. That means you need to put up CCTV signs, a little bit like you see in the shopping centers, saying that recording is taking place, and you have to explain why that's taking place. You also have to make sure that you don't capture more footage than required for the purpose that you have opted to have that security in place. And of course, you need to give people the option to exercise their rights. So don't be surprised if you have people writing to you or knocking on your door saying they want to exercise their rights and request a subject access request or request deletion of that information.
It potentially could be a legal minefield, couldn't it? I mean, assuming this judgment isn't overturned at a higher level by courts, one could see that sort of situations where people already have difficult relations with their neighbours, this could become another source of contention.
In crowded areas, in urban areas, especially in the cities where we live in very close proximity to other people, it could become a little bit of a contentious issue. But look, it's not that complicated. All we have to do is follow the same basic 7 principles that we teach at the Privacy Pros Academy, which is number 1, is make sure whatever you're doing is fair and you do it in a transparent way. So if you put up a sign explaining to people you're recording, then that means you're being transparent, you're fulfilling that principle. The second thing you need to do is make sure that you're not keeping that information for longer than required. So we're talking about storage limitation. And most people don't need to keep that for more than 7 days. Within 7 days, you'll know if there's been an incident and you can delete it after that. You can actually set these devices to auto-delete after a certain amount of time.
That's useful to know.
Some people will say they don't want to record anything at all. They don't actually have the space. Other people might insist they keep it for a bit longer, especially if they're not at home for long periods of time. A lot of the time with the Ring doorbell cameras, people want to answer the door when they're not at home and they want to talk to the delivery.
Use that on the mobile.
You don't actually need to record that information at all, so you can just follow the storage limitation.
That's very good advice,
You've got the principle of data minimization, which basically means that you shouldn't capture more information than you require.
It's a good principle. Jamal Ahmed of Kazient Privacy Experts, thank you so much for that comprehensive explanation. Certainly one to get people thinking, particularly if they have one of those doorbells. Thanks so much. Right, it is